Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Hernandez, host of the Truth That Heals podcast. And today I wanted to talk to you about depression and what it looked like inside the cult that I was in from that cult perspective. And I'm doing this because not that long ago I had an interview which I uploaded with the amazing Dr. Rebecca Allen. And I presented some questions about depression plus the cult behaviors, and I think I was really lacking in the way I presented it because you can't read my mind, the audience, and of course, Dr. Allen as well can't read my mind. But as I'm throwing these questions out there regarding depression and the cult behaviors, my mind is seeing all the memories kind of flooding back. So I feel that I I did a poor job in presenting what depression looked like inside the cult, but for this short episode I wanted to break it down. Now, one of my difficulties with telling my story is that it's complicated because in the cult, and other people can testify to this from other cults, it's very complicated. There are so many twists and turns, but I'm going to try to make this as simplified as possible so it can be easily understood and so we can break it down. So the first scenario that I want to present is for the beginners. So let's say you've just joined, you're in this new community. Now you have to learn the way of life, you have to learn the rules, you have to get used to those who are around you, those whom you're living with, and having that bond. However, when the leaders, when they see someone who is, let's say, not obeying all the rules, someone who is depressed, someone who looks sad all the time, someone who looks like they want to go home, or if, let's say, you're homesick. I remember there were three approaches to helping this member to persevere in that vocation. The first thing that they would do would be to talk to this person, kind of having like a counseling to guide and to see why is it that this person is struggling? Why is it that this person is, for example, not making it on time to prayers or for early rising? Or why is this person homesick? And hopefully through that discussion, counseling, that'll help the member, and that depression, that sadness, that homesick attitude that they might have, it'll go away. But let's say that doesn't work. The second thing would be is to put that person in isolation. Put them in isolation in a state of prayer so that they can be alone, they can pray, and they can have that communication with the Lord. But let's say even after that, after counseling, after giving them time to pray, to fast, to have that conversation with the Lord, let's say that doesn't help, then the third thing to do would be to tell them, okay, maybe this place isn't for you. Thank you for trying. It's better maybe you go home, and may God bless you. So that's how it was presented. But the reality is that if you were to show those signs of depression, of sadness, of being homesick, of having a hard time following the rules, they would say that that person is going through crisis, that person is going through a spiritual battle, and that by speaking with them, hopefully it'll wake them up. But I've spoken with a few people whom have left, of course, who has shared with me that when they were spoken to, it was more like a threat. It was more like, that shame that if you leave this place, you're going to disappoint God. If you leave, God's not going to bless you. Or that if you leave, you're going to be cursed by God. So why don't you just try this life out? Stick it out, because if you stay with us, God will bless you. Another example is with me. When I first joined, I tried my best to follow the rules, to be the best person, the best member I could be. But I remember there was a time where I was sad because no matter how good I tried to be, no matter how obedient, no matter how hard I tried, I would always be, let's say, late to prayers because I was I slept in a little bit, and it was very difficult. And I felt defeated. I felt like the biggest failure. And what happened was that one of the elders at the time, he yelled at me. He humiliated me. But I guess it worked because with that humiliation, with him yelling at me, with him telling me how much I offended God, how, like, look at you, you're offending the Sacred Heart of Jesus by you being sleepy. You suck. Pretty much, that's what was being said. I should have walked and gotten the hell away from there, but instead, in my 17-year-old mind, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm offending God by being sleepy. I'm offending God by, I don't know. I didn't even know how I was offending God, but I just knew that I was offending God. And they tell me that this is where God wants me to be. So I continued on. So after I got that yelling of a lifetime, I put that smile on my face. I gave it my best, and I stayed for, for a whole decade after that. But I really wasn't genuinely happy. It was more like I had to force myself. Okay, put that smile on your face. Let's obey. I don't want to hurt God. We got to do this. God is counting on me to save souls by doing this. But for others, having that scolding or counseling, whatever, it didn't always work, and they would still have those outward signs of sadness, of depression, or as we would say again, oh, that person is in crisis. So let's say that counseling doesn't work, then they will put you in a state of prayer. You can be in silence. And the reason why they would separate members was because they would say, if a person is in crisis and they haven't gotten over their crisis, they're going to infest the other members with evil spirits. So they already see you. If you're sad, depressed, in crisis, they see you as an agent of Satan. They see you as a demon. So they need to cast you out, have you separated. Yes, they'll say, oh, we have Brother Ryan here separated so he can pray and fast and so he can have that communication with God. But the truth is, they want to put your ass down. They want you to feel shame. They want you to feel humiliated. And I think that they also want to have that power over me. And that's what happened. They had so much power over members, putting them in that isolation, putting them on the side. And let's say that didn't work. Let's say the member is still sad, depressed. They would say, hey, at least you tried this life out. Thank you, but it's best you go home. That's how it's presented. But when a member would leave, especially like in the beginning, when a member would leave, the leaders at home, and when I say the leaders, I really mean like the founder and some of the sisters on his side, the way they would talk about those members who left was pretty much like, they are KIA. They were killed in action. They couldn't make it. They weren't strong enough. Their prayer life, they didn't have real faith. See how they failed? See, God isn't going to bless them. So that's how we were being brainwashed. They would use examples of those who had been going through depression. I would see, and others we'd see their journey of struggles, and after they left, the way they were talking about them was just so horrible. And so it put in my mind, well, damn, I can't leave this place, because if I'm going to leave, I'm going to be like that ex brother, like that ex sister. It's a life of shame. Okay, now that was the first scenario when you're first entering the community. That's like the first year. That's how they view depression. But now I want to get to the second scenario, and that is when you're in the community for several years now, because you already know that if you leave, you're going to be cursed, that if you leave, they're going to talk shit about you. If you leave, you're going to be a loser. That's how they present it. And that narrative stays in the person's mind. Maybe some people heal from it. Good for them. I wish them the best. But for me, it took me a long ass time because that really stuck with my mind that if I leave, God's not going to bless me. And at the same time, if I show inside the community, it's like I wanted to express authenticity, but you can't. Because if you show that you're sad, if you show that you're frustrated, you know what's going to happen to you. You know that they're going to, you know, give you the talk. And in the talk, it's not a you can't be open. They're not listening to you. They don't give a shit about what you say. They don't give a shit about how you feel. Their viewing is, hey, you chose this life. They put the blame on you. Oh, you chose this life. But the truth is, we chose that life out of fear. We chose that because we were being manipulated. There was a lot of deceit. So yes, there was so much fear of leaving. And I think later on, after being there for so many years, it was scary to confront my real emotions. And because every time I wanted to like be depressed, like embrace my depression, I guess. I don't know how to say it. But every time I encounter those things, I remembered I have to suck it up. I have to put on that smile because if not, I'm going to be punished. But then there came a point where I didn't care about the punishments anymore. So now I want to present the two scenarios side by side. So the first scenario, again, is when you're still new in the community and you're kind of learning the ropes and you're struggling and they're kind of trying to help push you along the way. But if not, if you can't make it, if you're not fit for that life, you know, they'll kindly say, hey, have a good life. We'll send you home. But for those of us who stayed for years and years longer, we saw the reality that for those people who left, even in the beginning, they talk shit about them. So if you're at home and you're thinking to yourself, oh, Alliance, they're a great community. Oh my gosh, you know, I stayed there for a year. They were really nice. Well, the truth is that once you left, they talk shit about you. They would say stuff like, oh, he or she is cursed. Or hey, he or she, that person, they couldn't hang. They weren't holy enough. They weren't good enough. They must have been cutting corners. They must have infestations with demons. That's the kind of crap that they would talk behind your back. That was the language of the community regarding ex-members. Now, that's the first scenario. The second scenario, for those of us who had been there for several years, is we saw all that. The difficulty with being there for several years, the depression was different because for me, I mean, I showed signs of crisis, depression in the beginning, and, you know, they smacked that shit right out of me. But later on, I was afraid. There is that fear to be authentic. There is that fear to really share one's emotions, because if you share your emotions, you know, your crisis, then you don't know what's going to happen. It's either you're going to be in isolation, you're going to be scolded again, humiliated, public humiliations. Maybe you're going to get less food. So, and another thing is that once you've been in there for several years, we've seen how demonized other ex-members have been. And for me personally, one of my biggest, I don't want to say just fears, but what brought me sadness was that I had wanted to leave for quite some time. But I knew if I leave, even though I try my best to leave on good terms, I know no matter what, they're going to call me terrible things. They're going to say I'm a hex member. They're going to say I'm infested with demons. They're going to say that I suck. They're going to say that, oh, Ryan couldn't stick it out. He wasn't strong enough. He wasn't holy enough. He was selfish. I knew that they were going to say those things because I've heard it said about other members. Oh, this person, yeah, they couldn't last because they're proud. They're arrogant. They're selfish. Or that person, they're lazy. They couldn't wake up for prayers. Like, my gosh, they slept an extra 15 minutes, totaling 3 hours and 15 minutes. Oh my gosh, such lazy people. And a last thing I want to add, a bonus on the way the cult viewed depression was that I remember it was actually in my first year, right before we got sent to the Philippines, if I remember correctly. So it was around the year 2005 when we received this thing called an examination of conscience. And I remember there was a part there, and this examination of conscience was the most scrupulous thing I'd ever seen. But anyways, there was a part there that said that depression it's a sin, that being depressed is a sin. So when I read that, for several years, I felt that the feeling of depression, I felt that, feeling down and, just going through that human experience, that it was sinful. So anytime I would have feelings of sadness, depression, or like when a loved one in my family passed away, and yes, there's that feeling of depression, but I'm fighting against it. I'm battling, and it's not just the spiritual warfare or spiritual combat, but it's also your mind, your emotions. It's all of that it's being messed with. All right, now, so to wrap things up, the reason why I wanted to talk about this again was to really clarify what depression and what crisis prone look like inside the cult. And during that interview with Dr. Rebecca Allen, I feel that I left a lot out when I was presenting depression and crisis, but I needed to get it off my chest. So if you've stayed to watch this whole video, thank you very much. I hope you subscribe. Please feel free to comment and tune in to my upcoming episodes here on the Truth That Heals podcast. Peace out, y'all.